belief, responsibility, ideation, achiever, connectedness. My name is Tony Grebmeier, and I'm the CEO at ShipOffers.com. My biggest aha moment around learning my strengths was there's so much more to learn.
I'm Darren Verasami,
I'm Brandon Miller,
and this is the Strengths Whisperer.
the show empowering leaders to create, build, and sustain great places to work.
On this episode, we have Tony Grebmeier, the CEO and co-founder of ShipOffers. Tony, my friend, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Man, so good to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to jump on the show today.
Now, Tony, when we were chatting in preparation for this show, you mentioned you had taken the assessment back in 2019, and you said, you'd gone through the pandemic with the business. You had made some changes in your own life, and you said, these results seem like they might shift for me. So we actually had you retake it, and I actually want to dive right in and talk about. So in 2019, your top five were achiever, belief, significance, woo, and relator. Can you share what your new top five are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you the reason I retook it is because I truly believe we change all the time. Not really a lot, but there's significant change if you look for it. So I knew I had gone through a lot, like you had mentioned, just had life up and downs. But my top five are belief, responsibility, ideation, achiever, and connectiveness.
I think what's so fascinating about that, so from your 2019 report, you had responsibility at number 12 and ideation at number 14. And so seeing those move up so significantly when our strengths are in our top 15, those are areas that we have access to them and there's definitely strength in them. But it is a matter of nurture and nature how we develop these particular strengths. So when we think of responsibility, ideation, we had changes that might have taken place in life where you were working those muscles out a little bit more and they were brought forward and brought to the top. What is interesting is what has stayed for you is belief has now moved to your number one spot. Achiever has moved to your number four, and connectedness in 2019 was actually at number six. So that's moved into the number five spot. But you did have some significant movement with responsibility and ideation jumping up. Ideation, Tony, is a strength that really gets a lot of energy through throwing different ideas out there and really going down the path of connecting things that seem like maybe they shouldn't have connection. So a lot of times ideation can see the connections between elements and that big picture of spaghetti on the wall, proverbially speaking, and being able to connect those dots and mashing things up, and loves the process of laying out different ideas to basically give rise to the best of them. How has that played out in your professional life and even in your personal life?
It's interesting. When I took the test originally, you're kind of going through the motions. And one of the things that really had happened in 2017, 2018 were just kind of movement years for me personally. And in 2019, I was kind of settling into a different dynamic in my business. And now in 2023, I look back at some of the, significant things that have happened. We all went through a pandemic, some good, some bad, some just horrible. But like I lost my mom, and my mom was a sounding board for me always. And here I am in 2023, no mom, no dad. I have them, they're just not present in this way. And so I called my neighbor yesterday. It was an interesting story. He's a little bit older than me. His name's Brad. And I told him, thank you. And he goes like, for what? And I was like, thank you for letting me talk things out with you. It helps me a lot. And that's one thing I've known with ideation is for me, I get new things all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm driving on my tractor or just working around the property, on our ranch or at my office. I'm always thinking and getting ideas, but sometimes they're in the back and they get further in the back. Now I'm just doing something really uniquely different. I'm taking them and writing them down when they come more frequently, putting them in my notes on my phone. And then I'm like making a priority to follow those, up and review them. And I've been really spending a lot of time in ideation. So I've got a couple of fun projects because of making it a priority and not an afterthought. New things are coming to me now. I'm a believer in frequency. I'm a believer in energy. Everything around us is happening. It's happening for us, right? And I'm like, man, take these ideas and put them here and give them to people who are good at running We talk a lot about teams and company. I don't need to do all of it. I can maybe come up with the idea, but somebody may be able to implement it a lot better than I ever could.
That's really powerful. And I love that you made the call to your neighbor, just saying, thank you for letting me talk things out with you and go through that ideation process. A lot of times, that is what can be misinterpreted by different strengths. If somebody's a leader, right? If they're in a CEO role, if they're in a CHRO role, or whatever the title is, but if they're in a leadership role in an organization, they might naturally do what's called verbally processing, where they actually have a need to talk things out, where they actually talk to think. And what can happen is people hear a leader that is going through that ideation process that's very iterative, where we're just getting some dots on the table and then asking ourselves, what do we see when we look at it? Team members sometimes can see a dot and think that that's a directive, and that's not actually a directive. It's just a process for idea development to then hand it over to others to be able to empower them to take that and to run with it. Tony, as you've grown your company, how have you managed through that as a CEO? How have you managed that as a leader who has also been very focused on people development and creating a culture that's all about that?
One of the distinctions that really showed up for me several years ago was, I used to refer to people on our team as employees, right? Because it's very easy for businesses to say, here's your role, here's your position, these are the people. Well, it really became crystal clear that I don't like that language. And I really feel like we're all on the same team. So why don't we just call them team members? So, one, I shifted how I relate to the people and started realizing like we're all here and we may not all be here forever together, right? So I one of the biggest things that I really made sure was I needed to remind myself and my team that I'm just a stepping stone for their greatness. So if I'm there for you, will you be a stepping stone for my greatness? And we can collaborate and help each other to win. Language really has shifted for me over the years. Good friend of mine, Kevin Cohen, really helped me to implement this kind of test mentality. So instead of the dot being like, hey, this is a directive, we may put a test statement out. Hey, we're going to test this. Does not mean it's permanent. We're just going to test this and we're not going to stop testing it until we're done testing. People are like, what? I'm like, yeah, we're going to get major feedback over the next 2 weeks and we're going to revisit it. So just by shifting language, I've been able to implement, like even this morning, we did a little kind of fun game. We used an online profile and program for some trivia, had a bunch of people log in. I said, hey, man, we're just going to test this. This is new software. Never tried it before. Hope it works. And it was amazing. We all had a fun time. Everybody was like reminiscing on the 90s and listening to some people who were 4 years old and some people were in high school. It was just really fun. And that's what I have to remind myself every single day. Don't be lazy with your language. The people around you are looking to you for what to do. And I like to empower people to say, hey, if we reversed our roles, what would you do in this scenario?
From what I understand, Tony, at Ship Offers is you're in the fulfillment business, but you're in the people fulfillment business as well, because really focus the culture on who do you need to become. So is that correct?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Every single day when we walk into this office, today's the day. You and I have never seen today, ever. And we'll never see today again. And so if I can come in here and really, how are you doing? And when I ask that question, I want to know, how are you doing? Do we need
Mhm.
to take a 5-minute break and give you a couple minutes to clear your head? Like everything good at home? And I've heard from so many different leaders and organizations, you shouldn't care about that deep of a relationship with people. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Maybe that's what you think. What I think is like, I want the best out of you, just like somebody wants the best out of me. And so when we go through a kind of our hiring process and we say, hey, are you going to be a good culture fit for our company? And we're starting to talk. You and I have talked about this thing that we created called trainers and drivers. I like to get to know where my people are at. What do they need help with? And then what's a goal for them? So we know that when I see them walking down the hallway and I high five them and I say, hello, how are you? How's it going? Have you got any plans? Are you working on this thing that you've been talking about? And if they're not, then I know that there's something wrong personally, maybe a relationship, a death, they're sick, they're not feeling motivated. Sean Stevenson was my good mentor and coach. And he had this thing that I always like using called the When Life Works list. And you already know when your life sucks, so you don't need to build that list. But a when life works list is just putting down like 14 things that you know when your life is working, you're doing eating healthy, drinking water, exercising, you're dressing good, maybe clean shaven, whatnot. And your goal is to pick at least 4 things a day from your when life works list and focus on that. So if I can do that for myself, why wouldn't I want to do that and help my team to do the same? So I make a lot of suggestions. I never tell you what to do. I make a suggestion on, hey, you can fail my way or you can fail your way. But no matter what, I'll be here together with you.
Wow, a when life works list. If that is not something that people have done yet from a lens of strengths, that is at its core everything that strength stands for. And I really want to call out two of your strengths in particular that I really heard articulated there, Tony. So, belief, you're number one. Belief is a strength that drives us towards execution. You talked about how when you saw your results, it says, hey, you lead with execution. What does that mean? Well, belief, responsibility, and achiever, which are all in your top five, are executing strengths. But belief guides us to execute on things in our life, in our work, based on our core values. They have to be in alignment. You articulated that as to when you were talking about, well, others have shared this is what you need to do. You can't get so deep with people. You can't focus on them. You really shouldn't be digging into their drainers and drivers. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. And you said, hey, you know what? That works for you. That's your beliefs. But over here at Shift Offers, that's exactly what we're going to do because we're in the business of helping people become what they can be. You talk about elevating your life to elevate your success. And that's what it's about. And understanding those 14 items that show up when we're in a place of success is huge. I am a huge advocate of that. And it gets us warming up and playing to our strengths. The belief connectedness, dot connecting there is so powerful. When we look at it, Tony, connectedness is a strength that's very relational in nature, but it sees the big picture of how the dots connect. It will see the big picture. How do we get from point A to point B and all the different paths that we could take? But it sees how people are impacted through the journey. And that belief and that responsibility drive you towards your own personal accountability for making that human experience powerful when people are chosen to become part of the culture at Ship Offers. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Now, drainers and drivers, you talk about that, and that's now foundational in the Ship Offers culture. Where did that come from?
Same guy who helped me with test, test, test. Kevin Cohen, a business coach and good friend of mine. We met, man, almost 12 years ago. And he goes, sounds like you've got some drainers and you got some drivers in your life. And I asked him, I said, where'd you learn that? He goes, I heard it down the road. I just implemented it. I just thought it was so simple, built a course around it, just figured it was a great way to get a pulse check off of team members, where they're at and what they're up to, but also just a pulse check for myself. Like I can spend a few minutes in the morning and just say, all right, what are things draining me right now in my day? Like, what are the things I'm maybe wanting to avoid? And I just don't. As a good friend of mine, Jim, talks about naming and then claiming it. Like it's hard for us to move past our blind spots unless we can identify them. We all have blind spots, but they're only a blind spot once. After that, they're a choice. And so putting drainers and drivers down for me is like, what's draining me right now? Maybe my energy's off. I'm not sleeping well. Maybe at work, I'm dealing with a problem that keeps happening. And I'm like, I really need to bring a solution to this. And I'm not going to be the one because I keep experiencing the same letdown. So I need to speak up in my leadership meetings with my team and say, hey, what can we do differently? And so, trainers and drivers, what I like to do in the hiring process, when we are looking for the best person possible to come into our organization at that time and help us, people are going to always come into your life. And some of them are going to take you to just one level, and some are going to take you to levels you've never even dreamed of. And the people that get you to like 6 figures may not get you to 7, 7 may not get you to 8, et cetera. And so drainers and drivers really helps me in the interview process. I'm called in like, hey, would you like to meet the CEO? Sure. And they're timid and scared, because here's the
Mhm.
boss, the owner, one of them coming in. So I use drainers and drivers to break the ice. And I say, hey, this is just us to get to know each other. There's no good or bad. It's just life. So why don't we go to the board? And I always try to get them to go to a whiteboard, chalkboard, whatever. And I say, one, two, three on both sides, drainers and drivers. List out 3 things draining you at your last job, because that's going to give me an idea about maybe why they're looking for a new job or a new career path. And the same thing, or is like 3 drivers at your last job. And I just make it about work first. And then I ask them a separate question. I said, can you give me a personal and a professional goal? And I have done this 1,000+ times. And on average, nobody has a personal and professional goal. They may have one, but they don't have both. And if both are not there, I will tell you that most likely they've never been asked a single question, never been surrounded by personal development, never been poured into, never shown what was possible, never encouraged. I don't run my meetings at 9 o'clock. I run them at like 8:57 or 8:55. I don't want to do what every other boss or person you work with does. I want to challenge status quo, because I think status quo is what is normal in society. And I'm like, but I'm not normal. I think differently. If we can think differently, we can change the outcomes. And I'm looking for people who are just a little different. And when I get drainers and drivers, I don't say anything after they put them up. I say, all right, explain it to me. And then I shut up and I listen, and they start breaking it down, and they almost answer their question for themselves. They were bored. They weren't treated as a team member. They were treated as a pawn in a chess game, and they didn't feel like they added value because there was no value added to them. And I can start putting a kind of an idea together in my head about what are they going to add to our team. And I've been wrong twice out of those 1,000. And usually I then give my scenario, my kind of my overview of what I just heard. And I've had a lot of people cry, good tears. Never had anybody be like mad, but I make a statement when I walk into that room, and I make sure I say it when I leave. I said, my goal in this conversation is to leave you better than I found you. It's kind of how I started. I'm just going to learn how to get to know you. Whatever you put on your resume, whatever you've got in your head, like, let's throw all that out right now. Let's just have an open and honest conversation. Drainers and drivers goes up, personal and professional goal. And at the end, I ask this question: did I leave you better than I found you?
That's a pretty powerful goal to have. And then taking that, can you take us through the journey of trainers and drivers and how it's used regularly in the context of meetings and training and empowering your leaders to use this tool and technique and a tactic to help, maintain culture? Culture is just a series of habits, right? It
That's
is.
all it is. I mean, it's muscle memory for most of us. Most of
Mhm.
us forget that when life's going good, and then when life's going bad, you stop doing one thing or 2 things or 3 things or 4 things. I texted my trainer the other day. I said, good morning, coach. I said, over the past 40 hours, I've been back on track with food. Worked outside yesterday, got so much done, maybe a small feat, but I already feel good. I'm bringing my workout gear on my trip, and I'll ensure I get my workouts in. Something clicked the other day and I'm back. Results will speak louder than words. And it sometimes means just doing the things that are on your When Life Works list. Even people in my position in life that lead an organization or a team, man, I'm no different than the person just starting. I make mistakes, but I gotta at least be able to name them and claim them, as my friend Jim says, so that I can do something about them. And so drainers and drivers, we'll bring it into our, we call them Power 20 meetings. And that's where my business partner and myself will sit down with 2 people from 2 different departments. We meet, those 2 departments seem to work best together. We bring them in and I say, hey, give me your drainers and drivers. What's working right now? What's not working? And because we implemented it long ago, it's in language all the time. And they can tell me within about a minute what's working and not working. And sometimes, remember, I called my neighbor and spoke something out. They catch themselves and go, oh, exactly. Thank you. I needed that. Now I know what to do. Right. And so I built a 5-day course, befulfilledcourses.com, and it's just called Drainers and Drivers. There's video, and something unique that I don't want to give away is something that happens in the night video. So there's a morning video and an evening video. And I'm big in reflection. If you're not taking time in your day or your week to assess where you're at, that's why I like the strength finders, right? It gives me a chance to reflect from 19 to 23. I get to see my growth. But a lot of us don't take the time because we're too busy. Well, we don't get out alive. Why don't you m- make the time now to figure out where you can course correct and make some adjustments? And so, drainers and drivers, anybody who knows me, have ever been around me, it usually comes up in our conversation because I care that much about it. I always give credit where credit's due to Kevin. And Kevin's like, I didn't create it. I was like, I understand, but you gave it to me and I did something with it. It's in my books, it's in my journals, it's in my podcast. I don't want to ruin it. There's 5 days of just powerful stuff. It's free. I don't sell you anything. My life is about giving because somebody gave me the opportunity to be here where I'm at today by showing me some things that I didn't know I needed and has really helped me to shape me into the man that I am. So, this is my give back. I just recently turned 50, and Jim Rohn had said it. Much of like our first 50 years is trying to figure out life. The next 50 is to give away life. So, I'm in that, started about 47, 46, really just choosing to give things away. And probably right around 2019 is when I realized, man, I have an opportunity to do stuff differently. People avoid talking about what? Money. Why? Because it's like taboo. I built a podcast about like, what's your definition of success? But don't tell me about money. Tell me about all the other fun things, right? So I just don't think and do anything like everybody else. I want to live this one life to the best of my ability. And people like you, people like your friend Dove and my friend, are going to challenge status quo every single day you're around them. They're not going to let you get away with BS. They're going to say, so why did you move? And you're like, I sold everything. We moved our family. We thought we were going to be for like a year or two, but now I love it. I'm playing guitar. You've introduced me to Victor Wooten. You've introduced me to all of these amazing people in your life by doing, not sitting back and wait, hey, what's coming to me, but by doing. And so, Drainers and Drivers is going to help you identify some things really, really quick. And you be like, it's time. And what I will tell you, because I want to ruin Drainers and Drivers too much, is that a drainer can become a driver.
I can understand that because sometimes something that's a grind now, over time, we can grow into it and actually find that maybe we do love it. So some of my drivers, just hearing that, is I know when I'm in a space where I'm playing a little bass, like at least a few times a week, I feel really good. It's kind of like the red thread that kind of weaves through my life and creates a lot of connection for me, and it brings me a lot of energy. And part of that for me is because I've been playing for so long. It's an area where I can quickly get into flow, and I'm in my strength zone. So interestingly enough, it becomes a catalyst for playing to my strengths when I'm in my work life or when I'm showing up as a dad or when I'm showing up as a spouse, right? Because it's just this place I can go, get into the instrument, dive into it, really play, get into music, but it's warmed up just my whole body, my mind and my spirit to be in that flow state, and then that ripples over into other areas. Interestingly enough, for our family, a driver is, we actually joke about this and say it's a KPI, but for us as a family, we can tell how driven we are collectively as a family based on how many sunsets we're able to at least pause long enough to reflect, to take in and give gratitude for in a weekly basis. So there's lots of activities and different things like that going on with the kids. But if we can pause for 2 to 3 times per week and actually just take that in as a family, it's powerful. And we actually try to keep track of that. And that keeps a lot of drive going for us. I'm curious for you, Tony, what are some of your personal drivers?
First, let me say thank you so much for just sharing that. I think it's helpful for myself and anybody listening, right? It goes back to When Life Works list, just building something that's working in your life. I have a tattoo on my arm. I've had it since I was like 19 years old. It's a sun. And I believe you rise and fall. You only get so many sunrises and sunsets. And I am a big believer in getting up in the morning. And I take a lot of sunrise videos and a lot of sunset photos because I'm in awe of what we get to do in that period of the day. So a big one for me, a big driver for me is connection with my wife. We're empty nesting. We travel a lot. We're in a season right now, losing my mom last year. She recently lost her stepmom, and now she's also taking care of her mom and dad. They're divorced, and my wife's busy. So I'm like, how can I support my wife? That's a big driver for me. I get a lot out of that. I love helping my in-laws. When I was young in marriage, I wanted to move away from them, and now I really appreciate them. They've shown up just big in our family. So that's a huge driver for me. Family, because I have less and less of it. Another driver is kind of an interesting driver because my wife and I were just talking about it yesterday. I said on our drive home from her dad's, I said, would you have ever thought we would live out here in the country? And she's like, no. During the pandemic, we made just a very different move. We left suburbia and went to 35 acres in the country where there's like 200, people. There's no stoplights in our town. And we've embraced it and we just love it. We love gardening, taking care of the animals, just messing around and playing and having fun. But those are two big drivers for me. Is yesterday, man, I just felt new again, just getting dirty and cleaning and building and just getting scrappy with what's going on the property and spending time with my wife. Now, you would have asked me 10 years ago, those wouldn't have been drivers for me. Not that I don't love my wife, coming up on 25 years, but it was work, right? Got to work, got to make the money. And I really feel like in this season of my life, I am working a lot, but I'm just making sure my wife is with me a lot too.
Yep. Getting to do the work with her and some of that together. And that's actually strengthening your bond and your connection in that space. I want to ask just across the board in ship offers, outside of ship offers, because I know you've got a lot going. You've created the journals and Be Fulfilled. You've created courses. You've written a book. I want to open up the floor here for you to just talk a little bit about how are you creating a culture and a community that's going to live beyond you? Because I know that is at the core of who you are.
So one of the things that I often talk about is my job is to go into the cave fiercely, like just go into the cave, take a flashlight and see what I can see and shine a light for my children, my two boys. If they choose to go down that path, at least they know what's available to them, right? So I do that. At the core of who I am is really two things: contribution and connection. If I do those two things in a day, man, my life is great. And so that's how I show up in the office, show up in my friendships. Contribution and connection. Don't ask for anything in return. My sister and I recently identified that we're really good at taking care of others, and we kind of sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. So those are some things that I have noticed personally. But because I care at the height and level that I do, my relationships with a person who just joined or who's been with our organization 20 plus years, I know how to speak to them in a matter of just seeing their face. I can see their face with a smile or a little bit sad. I know how to drive the conversation. Not my job isn't to fix them. My job is to be there for them. And so that's relationships in and outside of the office. Culture is easy for me, right? Love what you do with the people you love being with. Also identify ways to brighten their day and do it often. A lot of people say, we celebrate anniversaries on this date. We do birthdays on this date in the company. I was like, every day is my birthday. I don't know about yours. I'm a day older. Secondly, was our anniversary. We just celebrated 22 years starting in my garage in 2001. And it was like 2:00. And I walked into Courtney's office. We worked together. And I said, hey, can you order something? She's like, sure. I got cookies on the way. Got cookies in the office for everybody after everything. And everybody was still talking about it the next day. And I said, it's the small things when you least expect it that have the biggest value. If you come to expect it and everybody thinks it's coming, I don't really get a lot of like, wow, that was great. I get a wow when it's great when they least expect it. So do that and do it often. And don't. One thing we implemented I thought was really, really cool: random breaks. They'll just pop up on the screen and we organize them and shuffle them all the time. It's like a 10, 15-minute networking break. Just like randomly will show up on the day and it'll just say 10 minutes for networking. That's different than like, hey, take a break. Like, this is networking. Talk to your coworkers, because everybody's usually head down working on a project or whatnot, or in the warehouse packaging orders or wherever they meet. But like 10 minutes is a substantial amount of time to walk outside, not look at the sun directly, but get some vitamin D. Make a phone call. Call your mom. Tell her you love her. Call your dad. Say, hey, man, when are we getting together? If you're so lucky to be able to do that. Call a friend and check in on them. 10 minutes is a lot. And our bucket throughout the day is slowly draining, right? And we need to have it constantly filled up. And for me, connection and contribution filled my bucket up.
Connection and contribution. And you have created that in the culture at Ship Offers, and you've created platforms and ways for people to do that through the Be Fulfilled world. Tony, you and I could talk, as we know, for days on end, and we've always had absolutely amazing conversations. I just want to thank you so much for joining us today on the Strengths Whisper and sharing your story of being a people first leader. You clearly are one of those. You're just chock full of so much wisdom every time I have the privilege of getting to speak with you. I'm so excited that we get to share this with our Strengths Whisper community. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, learn more about Ship Offers, of what it's like to come work there, come be a part of that culture, or learn more about Be Fulfilled or your book, where would they go?
First, thank you so much for the opportunity to just, like as you said, we could talk forever. You mean the world to me. You're a great friend. Photo on my wall in my office reminds me of what's possible when you don't know somebody and you find the time to build a relationship. You get that connection, right? And that means the world to me. So thank you for that. 2 websites, my first and last name.com, TonyGrebmeier.com. You'll learn about my journals, my courses, my book, all that fun stuff. 90-ish% of everything I have is free. Then ShipOffers.com is the company that we started way back in 2000, 2001. There's a reason both of them are mentioned. See, in life, I lacked personal fulfillment. I had professional fulfillment all along with Ship Offers, but I lacked personal. So I set out to really shift that for myself and others and realized if I can do it for me, why can't I share it with others? So Be Fulfilled is my brand that I created, and that's to be both personally fulfilled in anything and everything that you do. But let's talk about it personally and professionally.
Tony, thanks again for sharing. I just want to thank everybody for joining us on this episode of the Strengths Whisper. What did you take away from our conversation with Tony? We'd love to know. And remember, if you are interested in getting your Clifton Strengths top 5 results, just email us at Brandon, BRANDON, at 34strong.com. Thanks again for joining us on the Strengths Whisper. We'll talk to you soon.